Hi, and welcome to Conversations Worth Having. This is a Parent Academy presentation with a focus on our portrait of a learner. Today's disposition is resilience. Um, my name is Katie Branson. I am the coordinator of student well-being, and I am joined today by Vince DiTilio. He is our supervisor of professional learning. We also have a special guest today, which I will let Vince introduce. So, Vince, if we could talk just a little bit about Portrait of a Learner.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. So just so everyone knows, the Portrait of a Learner, this is a new project here in Olentangy that we hope maybe you've heard about or seen a little bit about, but really an attempt for us to identify the key dispositions that we are trying to build in the learners here in Olentangy and also here of the adults in the community and in the organization. And tonight in particular, we are going to be focusing on the disposition of resilience. And if one thing has been made clear this year, it's that we all face unexpected circumstances, whether it's the stress of just your daily life or this once in a lifetime pandemic that we're all still navigating. And if this wasn't challenging enough, all of us as adults and parents are also trying to be models of resilience for our young people at the same time, because we know they're also going through these complexities. So it's a disposition that benefits us both when we face significant challenges, but also when things are seemingly going well. You know, resilience helps us manage the day-to-day bumps in the road and see minor setbacks in a positive light. But like with any kind of hot topic, which resilience is, and grit and other words like that, there are some myths that are born around resilience. And we just want to put these out there before we start. And then hopefully as Dr. Good has a conversation with us, we can kind of see where we can push back against some of these. So first and foremost, one of the myths about resilience is that people are born resilient. And, maybe to an extent, we all have that inherently in us, but this is a skill. It's something that we can, it's not a fixed state. It's something that we can practice. It's something that we can be mindful of and get better at. So that's important to know, especially when working with young people. The second one, resilient people don't let things bother them. That is not the case, right? You can be resilient and still get annoyed, still get down, but it's about sort of how you come back from those things. The third myth, that resilient people don't need help. I think this is a very big misconception for our students, that resiliency means going at it alone. And honestly, it almost means the exact opposite, that resilience is cultivated through relationships, through interactions, through belonging to a community, whether that's in school or outside of the classroom. The fourth one, resilience is always good, right? And I think, there is a point where sometimes we do move on from things. We do move on to the next thing if it's not working for us. We never want a learner or a student or our children to feel as if they have to continue to slog through something that just isn't working for them. And sometimes we do just move on. And then the final one, resilience isn't always about bouncing back. Sometimes it's the idea of sort of bouncing forward, right? Or bouncing to the next thing. And I think that was kind of connected to that idea of it always being good. We got to remember that resilience sometimes doesn't mean going back and just doing the same thing we did, right? But it's kind of bouncing forward to another strategy or to another maybe opportunity, if you want to look at it that way. So for young people, we just feel that resilience is a very, very powerful disposition, and we are excited to have our featured speaker tonight, and I'd like to introduce her. Dr. Beverly A. Good is happy to have the opportunity to serve as a friend of the Olentangy Local School District. Her experiences include teaching, as well as continuing to work with English learners in Westerville City Schools as the district's English as a Second Language coordinator and building principal. In addition to her work in Westerville, she teaches TESOL courses at Otterbein University and coordinates and presents professional development for in-service and pre-service teachers throughout Ohio to improve the classroom support of English learners. She is a member of the Ohio ESL Advisory Committee and the past president of Ohio TESOL. Please welcome Dr. Beverly Good.
Welcome, Dr. Good. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us. And I'm going to start off. We're just going to have a conversation today because you just have such a wealth of knowledge and talking about really we're approaching resiliency from a kind of a different perspective today. And it's really refreshing. And Vince alluded to this with some of these myths about resilience and that it is more than failure. So could you start off by talking a little bit about your interactions, your experiences with English learners, with the immigrant population, and maybe some of the hardships and challenges that those particular group of people might be facing?
Sure. Thank you, Katie. It's great to be here with you today, and appreciate asking me to join you. And Vince extended that generous invitation. So yeah, I've had the wonderful opportunity over the past several years to work with the immigrant community and learned so much from them. I almost feel embarrassed by how much they provide me, how much information they provide me when I'm supposed to be teaching them. But they come with a different point of view from many of our native English speakers. And I think that's a large part of where they're coming from. So they're eager to learn, they're eager to share information. But more important, perhaps, is that their families, they all work together, in the community and within their families to create the idea of you have these opportunities, so you have to take advantage of these opportunities. Or there's this culture of optimism. They always have this optimistic point of view. So we can overcome this, and we are going to take advantage of it. So they have those kinds of things. And then each immigrant culture has its own set of cultural values that helps them to begin to appreciate those opportunities and begin to look for more opportunities. So they just have this optimistic point of view. So if they run into a challenge, whether it's in a classroom or whether it's in a social situation, they sort of are ready for that. They're ready to dig in and be resilient and learn more about the specific situation and how they can overcome any challenges that they might encounter.
Thank you. So you alluded that this is more than just a language barrier that people have to overcome. There's also those social and cultural challenges. Can you think of any examples or talk about what that might look like for people in the immigrant community in terms of, again, that social and cultural differences and hardships?
Right. It happens often in the classroom. We as teachers, having been a teacher myself, come to the classroom and we view things through our own lenses, our cultural lenses, our native English speaking lens. And we assume then that everybody else is thinking along those same lines with that same lens. But in reality, our English learners, for example, are looking at it through their lens, through their culture. So if we as teachers, or as native English speakers, whether it's a teacher or a student or administrator, if we don't understand that culture, their culture, then we have a challenge that we've made for ourselves by not understanding how they view things, what they think about things, and how they begin to approach a challenge or a problem. So we really have to be open to looking at their point of view and understanding the implications of that point of view for our instruction or for a social challenge or for anything else we're doing with the immigrant community.
So what factors, and I know you mentioned this a little, do you think contribute to the achievement of people who have that language barrier or those challenges? What are some of those factors? I know you mentioned community. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Right. Each immigrant community, whether it's Somali or a Spanish-speaking group or Nepali, we in Central Ohio are blessed to have so many different cultural groups, and they all approach it just a little bit differently. There may be common themes across all the cultures, but they just look at it in terms of how they view life, how they view challenges, how they view what they bring to the table or their assets. And that's another important piece I'd like to just mention, because we all have assets, even though we may not think of them. We may not be able to name off the top of our head, well, I can do this and this and this. But we do have a lot of different assets, and we didn't necessarily learn those in school. We probably learned them from our own communities or from our own families. And that's no different from an immigrant family. They have their own assets, which may be similar. They may be different. They may view something as an asset that we haven't even considered to be an asset. So again, if we as teachers and administrators, even parents, are not aware of or not even looking for something that is considered to be an asset in another culture, then we may be missing the boat and miscommunicating. So we really need to be aware of that and looking for those assets.
I really like that idea. It kind of goes back to what Vince was discussing, that, one of the myths is that people, in order to be resilient, have to go it alone. And it's quite the opposite in this community. And also that resilience, that we're just born with it. But it sounds a lot like these are learned behaviors that, especially in the home environment in which the parents are modeling and encouraging this for students, but also looking at what assets we have as individuals, and that can help contribute to our success.
Excuse my telephone. Sorry about that. Yeah, it is a little bit different, and many of the behaviors for the immigrants are learned behaviors. So I just think it's interesting. Thinking about my own, years growing up, I'm way back in the day, and I realized it was a whole different culture, a whole different scenario. But I don't recall my parents specifically teaching me, be optimistic, look at it this way, that sort of thing. But these parents appear to do just exactly that. Whatever appears in their culture to be of importance, they make sure that that information is shared with students, and in a way that they, meaning the students, can use that information in another setting, in a social situation or in school, so that they have those skills. And I'm not sure that as a native English speaker, I don't think I was taught that. So I looking at what I could learn from another culture, I could learn some of those takeaways.
Excellent. So I think definitely goes back to, it is less about who we are and more about the way we think about things and approach things. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the supports or resources that perhaps, people who are English learners or part of the immigrant population or community, what are some resources that they might link to, or just to help navigate and to become successful and to be able to really be resilient and thrive?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. One point that I would like to make, because of what you just said about being happy and beginning to thrive, our English learners, once they get into an English as a second language program, and as they begin to learn English, by the time they finish the program, they have sufficient language skills, cultural skills, and probably resilience to outperform many of their native English speaking peers. So they're doing a really fine job of learning this resilience. For English learners, their best resource for resilience is probably within their community. But I guess I would encourage the rest of us, native English speakers, to also reach out to the immigrant communities and have conversations with them. Find out what is important to them. Find out what information they are sharing with their students, so that we can begin to understand how that resilience works within another culture, and maybe then we can take some of that same information and share that with our students too, with our native English speaking students.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think making those connections, reaching out, learning from others, and like you said, what's considered a disadvantage is actually in the end an advantage to a lot of these students. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. We are closely reaching the end of our 30-minute conversation. I just wanted to, before I pass it back over to Vince, thank you, Dr. Good, so much for joining us. I know this is your passion. You do so much work and really helping students to flourish and helping teachers. And we thank you so much for coming and talking to us today and for continually being a friend and support for our district here at Olentangy. Thank you so much, Dr. Good.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Good. And we would just like to start to wrap up this conversation tonight, but really the point of these short conversations, we say, is to get the conversation started. And for you as the parent to think about how can you take aspects of this conversation and use it to have some continued dialogue with your student at home about how they show up resilient in the classroom, how they show up resilient on the sports field, and just in everyday life. And I really found some really insightful comments in Dr. Good's commentary on the immigrant community, and this idea that resilience really starts with looking at your assets. So having conversations with your student at home about what they have going for them, their skills, identifying those, and then leveraging those in tough situations. So our pulse check today, and this is our little conversation guide for something you can do with your student maybe after you watch this, is just a couple points that you could build a conversation around. So talk to your student at home and ask them the following, or to consider the following. If they finish whatever they begin. If they don't, maybe why they didn't. If they have persevered, why that happened. The idea that setbacks do not discourage me for long. Asking your student at home, you know, how they feel about that statement. I never stop working to improve. And again, these are just little starts for conversations that you can have with your students to get them thinking about where maybe they need to do some additional work in thinking about their resilience, but also where they naturally are resilient and how they can leverage that in other areas. So again, we want to say thank you to everyone who watches this video and has joined us for these conversations. We really would like to continue this conversation with the community around the dispositions in the Portrait of a Learner, and we look forward to seeing you soon. If you do have any feedback about today's sessions, we'll leave this QR code up on the screen for a few minutes. We would love to hear from you with any thoughts, comments, or maybe additional ideas for future conversations worth having. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.